We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
July 1969. Over 70% of today's Americans were not even born or are too young to remember this historic event.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And yet most of us know those famous words. What was it like to grow up during the space race? What was it like to watch it live as Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon and said those words? In this first-person flashback, Tim Gore shares his memory of the moon landing.
As a kid growing up, I was fascinated by space. I mean, and the whole idea that we were going into space was just kind of amazing to everybody. So like every space launch, class would stop and we would watch the space launch, right? Every space launch was televised live. And so if it was happening during the school day, we would watch them all. And I remember that growing up for sure. And so the whole process of going into space and everything that was happening had just been fascinating to me. And here, by the time we get to 1969 and we're going to land on the moon, I mean, it was just, for me personally, it was going to be the coolest thing in the world, but the whole country was kind of riveted to that. And I remember they gave instructions about how you could set your camera up so that you could take pictures of your television screen, so that you could then take pictures of them, being on the moon and when they were going to step on the moon and all that good stuff. So Dad had a Kodak Brownie camera, that I remember for sure. I was living in Central Standard Time at the time, Pittsburgh, Kansas. And so I don't remember the actual time of day it occurred, but my memory says to me it was late at night, that my brother and I were up late. Like normally we would have already been in bed. We're in the living room, and I can picture the living room for sure. And Dad's got the camera set up, and you're just, you were just glued to the television set. And the tension of them coming down, they're being separated from the spaceship that Collins is staying in, that keeps going around the moon, and they're coming down. And that whole tension of they're getting closer to the surface, they're getting closer to the surface, they're getting closer to the surface, and then they're going to land. And then not knowing what was going to happen. And then the landing itself was just so kind of like seamless, I guess would be a word I'd use now. It just happened. And then we had to wait a while. They didn't immediately pop out. It wasn't like, you'd gotten home and you're in your garage and you open the car door and you get out. There was some time lag in between. The excitement of them stepping out and seeing him step, and then, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, and saying all that was just so cool. We stayed up for a while and watched it, as they were out for a while. They weren't out a very long time, I don't think. But we stayed up and watched it. And then, of course, Dad got the pictures developed and brought them back. And sure enough, everything had worked just fine. I bet my parents still have those pictures somewhere in a box in the basement. I was 12 at the time of the moon landing. And to me, it was just the beginning of what could be people in space. I mean, I was born in 1957, the same year that Sputnik was launched. I grew up in the space race and the excitement of planetary exploration. So I just went right along with it, all that science fiction stuff. I mean, I just kind of envisioned that what we would, by now, like if I look back at it now at the age of 12, I would have thought that by now we had colonies on the moon. I would have thought we'd have people living on the moon by now. And that was kind of like the long-term expectation I think most of America had at the time, was that we would be on the moon and we would have colonies on the moon and you'd have people living on the moon and that would be the coolest thing in the world. Just somehow figure out how to farm the moon and all of that kind of stuff. And so there's disappointment in the sense that just vision never came to life, that you never had the chance to really move forward in that regard. But I just think that whole time period of post-World War II and the space race and the Cold War and just feeling the need to, by gosh, get there before those Russians did, and everything was just palpable. It really, really was. And obviously, very few of us were ever going to go into space, but we lived it all vicariously. And it was just amazing, that kind of sense of real unity around man kind moving in that regard, that way, and what you could get from it. The coming back, the ticker tape parades, all of that stuff was just, the splashdowns. Heck, we watched the splashdowns live in class all the time in the same way we did the liftoffs. It was just, it was just really important events.